All right, good morning. I think we're about ready to kick off in here. What I'll invite you to do is to join me in a word of prayer. Let us pray. Gracious God, Heavenly Father, giver of all good gifts, we thank you for the gifts that you've given to us. You've given us the gift of freedom, the freedom that we enjoy in our country. You've given us the gift of government over us. You've given us all authority. And we know, Lord, that all authority bows to you. Lord, thank you for the gifts of this day, for the people that are present here today. Be with those who are unable to be with us. Lord, there are many preparations that are occurring today, and so we pray they would be all for your glory. Thank you for delivering Frank to us in our midst, and we pray that the work that he shares with the folks here at the Lutheran Church would be to your glory. For all these things and all others we have to pray, we lift them before the name of Jesus. Amen. All right, so you heard in the prayer, we have a guest speaker today that I've been sharing with you is going to be coming. Frank Kremer is from Mission Advancement at the International Center in St. Louis. He and I met probably back in May-ish.
Yes, I believe
Something
so.
like that. He was down traveling through the area. He's the executive responsible for our portion of the country. But we had a great talk, and he shared with me some resources that their office puts out, which I told him, when we were sort of planning for today and the idea of this sort of old-fashioned mission festival, to think about what mission opportunities exist before us as a congregation. I was a little bit late getting in here because on the way out of church I had somebody stop me, and in the course of that conversation, one of the things that came up was they said, the Lord gives us his word and he calls us to be his people, and then he sends us out into the world to be a light to the nations. And I said, you're right, that's exactly what Israel was. Jesus was Israel reduced to one. When people looked on him, what they were to see was their heavenly Father. And the same holds true for us today, that when people see us as God's people, that we would act consistently with what our Lord Christ did and with what God's expectations of us are. And so the same sort of thought holds for us today, is that we live and we act not as the world does, but as the people of God do, because we live and act as people who trust in our God, who's overcome the world. And so we can do things differently, we can look a little bit differently, and then when people see us, what they're meant to see also is to see the God who formed us, created us, and sustains us. So when people look at us, they see God. Well, through our mission work and the support that we do for others, both locally, nationally, internationally, and some of the opportunities that Frank will share with you, the purpose of doing those things is to expose others to Christ, to get them to see who Christ is through our actions, sometimes confounding to people in the world the way that we live and act. And so that's sort of, the pastor's job is to train people how to do some of those things. But I'm pleased to have Frank here. That wasn't where I was going to go with all this.
No worries.
Welcome. Yeah. And if I keep talking, he won't have a minute to talk, so I'm going to turn it over to him. And he's going to fill as much time as he has for his presentation material, for questions you might have. And if we have any time left at the end, I might try and wrap up a few loose ends from last week. So I think that's sort of the plan for the day today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Frank Kremer.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor. I'm going to hand this to you real quick. So what this is a sign-up sheet. Every time I give a presentation, I like to, if you're able, if you can put your name and a phone number or an email address, either one or both. I do like to reach out to people to thank them for coming. We have a great crowd here today, and I try to make that a part of what I do, is to, I appreciate Pastor and also you as a church giving me the time to be able to come and speak to everybody today. So that'll be making its way around. If you can fill that out, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you. So as Pastor said, my name's Frank Kremer. I work at the International Center in St. Louis for the Synod, serving in a role as it mentions here on the screen. You'll see in several spots, I serve as a mission advocate. And what that means is I work in the Office of Mission Advancement for the Synod. I cover a 7-state region, Arkansas being one of them. And I get the joy to be able to visit with people both individuals as well as congregations visit with pastors and be able to tell them more about the ministries that we do as a synod, our synod, your synod. And so that it's a great joy to be able to do that, to just share more about the mission and what we're able to do to help people, both nationally, as Pastor said, internationally, and it's great to also see in Sharon, when him and I had the opportunity to meet, it was also great to hear about a lot of the great work that your congregation gets to do locally. So that's always a thing that's great to see as well. And kind of the first thing I like to say when I talk to people is thank you. Thank you for all the work that you do. Thank you also for your generosity as a congregation, because you have been able to support Synod Ministries as a congregation, and we've been able to see that over the years, but also most recently in areas such as our current national offering that we have as a Synod for this triennium, which is going to be working to, over the next 3 years, to translate resources for other nations, for other areas throughout the world, to share the gospel with people. Our seminaries, that's another area that you've been able to support through our joint seminary fund that we do as a synod to support our seminaries that are producing pastors. And also another area I know that your church has supported over the years has been disaster response, which is another area that we as a synod are able to partner with our districts and our congregations to help people in need when those tragedies happen. So thank you. So Pastor stole my thunder a little bit when he mentioned this, but this was something that I saw in a stewardship resource that the Synod does through our stewardship ministry. They do some devotionals that is available for any congregation in any district to be able to have their hands on. But this was one particular devotion that I had seen within there, and I think it does a good job of explaining just what we do in going out into the world. I think everything that we do, this is from Ephesians, this particular verse. I won't read the verse specifically, but what Paul is speaking about to the people of Ephesus in this verse is he's talking about stewardship and about how the greatest gift that we have that the Lord gave us is the gospel of Jesus. And that's something that in everything that I'm going to be covering today and going through, that is the first and foremost thing that's of most importance. Whether we're doing something here in the States or internationally, whether we're helping with a disaster, whatever it may look like, at its core, we are spreading the gospel to others. And like I said, it can look a lot of different ways, and I'll cover some different things, but that's just one that's the thing I always try to remember when I talk to people and try to point out to people is that that's kind of the most important thing. Everything else, we get to have because of that. And just so you know, just a quick disclaimer, I'm not going to be able to cover every ministry today when I talk about, I'm going to kind of touch on some specific things, but what I would encourage you to do is at the table over here, I do have some things that you guys can take, but one that I would encourage you to grab is this one here that says, "We preach Christ crucified." It's, I like to call it the roadmap to the LCMS. It basically just lays out in a easy way all the ministries that we have as a synod in different areas. And like I said, it would take way too long to cover all of those today, but I would just encourage you to look at that because it's a nice way to see a particular ministry, and then it tells you where you can go to find out more information about that. Certainly, any of you can contact me, and I'm always happy to help answer questions, but also it can point you to where specifically on the web to where you can take a look and find out more if there is a ministry that calls to your heart, something that you would like to know a little bit more about. And that's a big part of what we're able to do as well as mission advocates is when I do get to sit down with people or I get the opportunity to talk to them on the phone, email, whatever type of communication is, I do get to share that. And that's like the biggest piece of what I get to do is just to go out there and be able to talk to people about all of these things that are happening that our church is doing. And people can be a part of that. People can get tapped into that because it's not just sending missionaries, but it can also be resources. It can also be information that as a synod we try to do to share with people and be able to offer that to people. So grab one of these, just a quick little plug on that. So I'm just going to jump right into some different areas that we do in our work as a Synod Ministries. The first one, this is kind of a big one. I always like to tell people it's probably the easiest one to talk about with people is everybody wants to know about missionaries that are out in the field. And so this is the first one that I always talk about. This is our Office of International Mission. This is our, as it mentions here, we recruit, train, send out, and care for our missionaries, human care workers, and international educators. We currently have in the field just over 100 career and then what we call GEO, which is more of a short-term type missionary that are doing work, as well as we have what are called the ones that mentioned here, about 20. That number has actually grown a little bit more, what we call alliance missionaries. And what that program is along with the missionaries that we're able to send out as a synod from here from the States, we also have relationships with many church bodies throughout the world. And most of our alliance missionaries, these are ones that are actually pastors from our partner church bodies. The biggest one being our church body that we're in partnership with in Brazil. They have a lot of trained pastors that send out missionaries to different areas just like we do. And they're supported specifically by their own church body, but we as a synod have built a strong relationship with them and kind of help in supporting them as well with the work that our alliance missionaries are doing. Because they're doing the exact same things in different areas of the world, just like we are, the ones we send here out of the States. And it's been a great relationship. It's been going for a while now, but it's continuing to grow. And I would say we're probably producing, there's missionaries going out from through our alliance program almost as much as what we're doing from our own ones here in the States. And so it's been a real blessing to see how we can kind of continue to help a partner church body that we work with in being able to, they want to do that as well. They want to send people out to be able to preach and share and spread the gospel to others. So it's been a great program to see, and it's one that continues to grow. As I mentioned here, there's the numbers kind of ever changing, but approximately 78 countries that we are doing work in, our missionaries, and that includes our alliance missionaries as well. And this just kind of shows just how it's kind of hard to see, I know, for everybody to be able to see specifically, but we're doing work because our international mission is divided into 4 particular regions. We have Latin America, we have Africa, we have Eurasia, which includes Europe and the countries there, and then Asia. And so we kind of have 4 main regions that we're doing all of our work. And what this doesn't, you can't see very well, but on this chart it shows kind of approximately all the areas where we are doing work, but also where a lot of our partner church bodies and different Lutheran church bodies that either ones that we are in full fellowship with in altar and pulpit, but also ones that are working towards that designation to be in fellowship with us that we work with as well. And so just kind of, we have a large reach in areas that we're able to work, and that's a really important piece to have to be able to do work with those partner church bodies, because the mission's still going to be there with any area that we go throughout the world. The mission's still going to be there long after a missionary is there. Because we don't, in all these areas of the world, we don't necessarily have a missionary that's placed there forever. And so it's such an important piece to have that relationship that we do with those church bodies, because that's able to lay the foundation and be able to allow everything to continue to grow in those areas as the faith spreads. Just to touch on a couple of little specific things, I'm just going to cover a couple specific programs that we have. This particular one here, this takes place in our Africa region. We have a child sponsorship program called CCCK, Christ Cares for Children, Kenya. It's a program that started about 10 years ago, where it's similar to organizations like Compassion International, where we have both congregations and individuals that are able to sponsor children that are in one of our Project 24 sites. We do this in conjunction with the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Kenya, where they have 9 project sites where they house these children that are being sponsored as they're in their school year and working through their school and studies. And of course, everything that we're doing with them getting their education, we're also able to spread the gospel of Jesus. And what's been a really neat thing about this program specifically is that people that started in the program at its inception over 10 years ago, we're starting to see them becoming adults, and some of them getting into ministry, evangelizing to others, bringing people into the faith, and have had even a couple that are considering going into becoming pastors, becoming evangelists, becoming church workers in their own country, and it's kind of neat to see that full circle be able to happen with a program such as this. And in these particular pictures, what this was is last year around Christmas time, we were able to, because many of these students, even though they're staying in these dormitories, they still do have their families and their villages. And what this was able to do is provide some essentials that they were able to bring back to their families, just goods and things like that they would be able to share with their families. And so it's just a neat way to continue to kind of have that relationship, not just with the students that are in these programs, but also their own families in their villages and places where they live. So this one, I'd mentioned about translation services and that being a focus that we're doing as a synod through our national offering. But this specifically was recently the Lutheran Heritage Foundation, which does a lot of work in translation. We're able to provide our Lutheran hymnal in Spanish language. They had prepared these, and they did this in conjunction with an organization in Brazil. But what gets kind of tricky with these is the logistics of actually, when you have this resource, being able to get it to those that need it and want it and have a desire for it. And so in this bottom right picture here is a Reverend Munch who serves in Belize. He's one of our missionaries. And he had, as it mentioned there, 4 countries, 8 days. He had a trek that he did working with local pastors and local lay people to deliver these across 4 different countries, into Honduras, Mexico, into Guatemala, and Belize as well, and be able to actually, such an important piece in Honduras was also where Pastor Munch there, that's one of our Alliance missionaries, that's to the left of him in that picture. And then a local pastor in the bed of the pickup truck there with cases. That's a local pastor in Guatemala that was helping out Pastor Munch as well. But it's the logistics to be able to do this, going through customs, going through all the different channels to, in such a short period of time, be able to deliver. In this case, it was, I believe, 50 cases of the Lutheran hymnal in Spanish language. And be able to do that, and all the people that God placed to be able to work through Pastor there and being able to do this. And in some of the places at the very end of the trip, what they were able to do, the last one he did in Mexico, they were able to actually do the Vespers from the hymnal for the first time. That was something they had never done in that particular area. And so it's really powerful. That's such a powerful piece to be able to bring such important resources into people's hands in their own native tongue. Because that's kind of a key piece of it, is to be able to provide that in their own language. And that goes all the way back to the start of the church when Luther was wanting to do that, to be able to bring it in the native tongue to people. In that case, the Bible, obviously, in the beginning. This here is this is a photo of when the Ukraine war took place. When the Ukraine war started, obviously there was a lot of refugees that were having to leave the country in a very quick and sudden manner. This is in our Eurasia region. This particular here, this is a worship service in Germany. A lot of Ukrainian refugees went to Germany when the war broke out. And what we were able to do as a synod is we have in Wittenberg the old Latin school, if you've ever heard of that. Wittenberg being such a historical site for Lutheranism. They were able to convert that old Latin school into housing for Ukrainian refugees. Many of them already part of the Lutheran Church. We do have the Lutheran Church in Ukraine actually just went into full fellowship with the Synod, and so they have a strong Lutheran presence in Ukraine. But of course, being that it's war-torn right now, a lot of them are displaced from being there, and so this is actually a service going on in Germany. But that's been a great opportunity to be able to continue to bring the faith and be able to offer to these people in need a place where that they can kind of start to get their lives back together, because there's no telling when that war is going to end and what their life's going to look like once that ends. And so it's being able to kind of provide a place of respite for them in the meantime, and be able to also still go to service, have their faith, worship with others is such an important piece. This here is in Southeast Asia. This is in Cambodia. The gentleman in the middle with the backpack, that's Pastor Sima, J.P. Sima. He is a missionary in Cambodia with his wife and family. Oh, your classmates? Okay. Very good, yes. And he, in this case, he's doing work. He's a theological educator there in Cambodia, does a lot of work with theological education, but he also gets the opportunity to help out and assess situations. In this particular one, there was flooding that had taken place there in Cambodia, and he was working with the local people there to kind of help assess the situation and determine potential needs that were out there. So, and it also gives all of these, like I had said, give the opportunity to be able to share the gospel and be able to share that with people as you're interacting with them and ministering to them. Before I cover this, one thing I did want to make mention of, and I noticed I had actually left this out in my presentation, but I wanted to cover it briefly, is one thing that we do as a synod with our missionaries is a lot of our missionaries are educators, and they're doing theological education, whether it's just basic teaching of people, teaching people kind of just the main tenets of the church, but also they work at a lot of the seminaries that are throughout the world. We have a lot of seminaries. They're not specific LCMS seminaries, but they're seminaries that have been formed by our partner churches in these different countries throughout the world. And one thing we've seen is such a huge growth in the church worldwide, especially in Africa. That's one area that we've seen such an explosion of people coming to the faith. And with that, of course, when you're evangelizing and you're bringing all these people in, is they want to know more. They start to have people that want to become evangelists. They have people who want to start to become church workers, deaconesses, pastors. And so a lot of these church bodies have formed seminaries. And so that's one thing where there's been such a clamoring. A lot of our missionaries do teach at a lot of these different seminaries. And the Dominican Republic is where one of the largest seminaries in that region are, that bring people in from different countries. And we have missionaries that teach at those seminaries. In Africa, it's the same thing. Did you have a quick question? Yes, yeah. That's definitely something that we have seen. I think where we might be going a little bit, and this is you're seeing where the church is exploding in places like Africa, especially being the big one that people talk about. Our missionaries that are working in a place like Europe is probably farther along than we are, and some say they're in like a post-Christian setup where the church. What's happening in the U.S. in a lot of ways across all denominations has already happened in a lot of ways in Europe. But where you have that glimmer of hope, and what we're seeing is that our missionaries, especially in Europe, are doing a lot of work with refugees. We have some specific, not just Ukrainian refugees like I mentioned earlier, but we have ones that come from Iranian refugees, Syrian refugees that we have. In Germany specifically, we have a missionary that's kind of became where the main focus of his ministry has been, is working with the church body there in Germany to minister to these, to especially to the Persian people. That's where we've seen a lot of a lot of Iranians that are coming to the faith, and that's actually one of the largest areas that we're seeing in Germany specifically. A lot of the people that are going to church and the growth that is happening within the refugees. And so, but I'd love to say that I have the answer when it comes to why here in the U.S. that unfortunately people are falling away from church, and that my best thing I can say to people is just pray. I mean, I'd love to say I have a solution. Unfortunately, I don't personally. But yes, sir.
I heard this several years ago at a mission and outreach meeting in Fort Wayne. There was Nigerian pastors there, and they made the comment that there were more Missouri Synod Lutheran churches in Nigeria than there were in the United States.
Oh wow. Okay. I say I don't know that number specifically. I know in Nigeria, I believe we don't have any specific missionaries that are working in Nigeria currently, but we do have, I believe, one of our alliance missionaries out of Brazil is working in that country. But it wouldn't surprise me to hear that number. I know in countries like Ethiopia, even in Madagascar and different countries, the size of our entire synod, those countries have more Lutherans than what's even in our own church body spreading out the entire country. Ma'am.
Are there other Christian churches that are working in the same areas, countries you are, that you kind of work together maybe to get
I know that there is. I've definitely heard about through just once you start. I've been in this role that I'm doing with the Synod for just over a year, and so as you start to learn more about what's happening with our missionaries, I hear about other church bodies, or you come across people. So I know it's happening. There's definitely I've heard of different faith bodies having across several denominations. Now the partnership, that would probably be more apt to like specifically what's happening in that particular country. I mean, certainly I would say as much as possible you want to try. I mean, you're all there to spread the word, obviously, and I'd say each country is different in terms of kind of what that missionary or what our director that sort of leads each of our different regions, what the partnerships look like. It's hard to say. I don't know that specifically to say if there are happening in every country. Probably some more than others, I would imagine, just depending on where you're at. But yes, I've definitely seen it just through my own research and seeing. So. Yes, yeah, because each country is different in terms of like just to what level they've heard about Jesus, they've heard about Christianity. That definitely, you're starting with a lot of these people from the very beginning, and then you kind of work your way towards more with like specific teachings, or if you get into like Luther's Small Catechism and other areas like that, you're starting them off with just in a lot of cases Bible stories. And just giving them just the basic tenets and introducing them to the Bible. So, but yeah, any ability for partnerships, I think, is a great thing, because it just allows to kind of work together towards a common good, even though denomination-wise, there obviously may be some once you get more deeper into specific beliefs, but a lot of times you're bringing it for the first time to people. Yes, sir. We did, up until recently, we did have a couple of missionaries that were working in specific areas. We had one that was in the Baltimore area. We had one that was in Indiana as well. But currently, we don't have any specific missionaries working here in the States. But
I'm going to see if I can help answer the question
Sure.
I got asked there. Actually, on a couple of these levels.
Yeah, sure.
Because I do know. So we just had a Fall Pastors Conference. And one of the things that we do is we do a President's Report during the Fall Pastors Conference. And we're broken up in the United States, we're broken into districts and circuits beyond that. Okay, so we're part of the Mid-South District, which includes Arkansas, Tennessee, and a portion of Kentucky. And at the pastor's retreat, one of the things that the president of the district does is he reports on the actions of the district. We do have churches, local churches in our district that are setting up mission opportunities in the United States. Okay, so it's not like we're without, I think that goes beyond the scope of maybe what the Office of Missions and Mission Advancement does. We're not funded by Synod. So to give you a picture of kind of how this works, we as a church, we give budget dollars. We essentially tithe off of our general budget here. That's what it amounts to, maybe a little greater than that. Mark could probably answer the question with more specific detail. We tithe and give that money to the district office. The district takes those tithes in from all the churches in the district, and then they tithe off of their budget to the Synod. So Synod is supported by our funds ultimately at the end. So the work that they're doing at the synodical level is funded from us ultimately, right? So the things that he's talking about here are, you're already funding some of these things, but part of the purpose of him being here today is to show you that, if there are things that are specifics within the synodical framework that might interest you individually or us as a church. One of the trends that happened, I would say maybe 20, 30 years ago is, or even more, because I was involved in some of this to some degree at my old church. We had a group called the Haiti Lutheran Mission Society. And it was funded by a guy in our congregation who started traveling to Haiti and enjoyed it. And set up what's called the Haiti Lutheran Mission Society. They brought a gentleman over and they got him training to be a pastor at Fort Wayne. He was a Haitian national, and then they sent him back to Haiti and he started a church as a missionary. Synod didn't pay for him. Our church and the donors at our church paid for him. And we started the Haiti Lutheran Mission Society. We built a school, we built a church building. And that's what got me involved, was I started going with my church's youth group to Haiti. Well, then suddenly, Haiti started training other pastors in this church and out of this church and inviting other pastors to come down and do education. And we started developing several pastors down there, which eventually developed into the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Haiti. And they became their own individual international mission that now is a partner church of the LCMS in the United States. But what I'm trying to describe to you is it started as a trend that was locally funded by the church, because this trend was that churches, instead of wanting to give their money to Synod and districts and things like that, wanted to see the results of their funding effort. We don't want to just give it to Synod and it's some amorphous cloud that's out there. We don't know where it ends up. He's showing you where it ends up, okay? So the trend was, let's just do some very specific things. But what that did, you see, was churches pulled back from their general funding of their districts and Synod as a result, and the dollars at district and Synod fell because churches were repositioning their dollars towards their own local mission stuff that they were interested in. Okay? Well, now you've got all these individual missions that are going on connected to individual churches, and district and Synod started not seeing the funding come in, and they could no longer fund missionaries and people that were in the field. So we're sort of recovering from that cycle right now, if that's a fair assessment. But I've sort of been involved in this, and actually some of the places he's talking about, a classmate of mine, Christian Twos, is in Germany working with Ukrainian refugees. Yeah. My little brother from seminary, Shawn Trump, is the Western Africa regional director,
he's director
of international missions. So there's an effort on the part of the church to serve both internationally, but then now that we're getting back into a regular cycle of funding our districts have taken upon themselves sort of an Acts chapter 1 view, which really you'll see with them. And I'm not trying to steal your thunder.
No.
An Acts chapter 1 view, the way Luke writes at the beginning of Acts, is that the gospel would go out from Jerusalem to Judea to Samaria to the ends of the earth. And it really defines layers. So your Jerusalem is your locality. So to give you guys an idea of what that looks like for us, our Jerusalem is right across the street. We have a food pantry. We have the Ozark Center of Hope, and we're serving our local community. And that's a mission outreach of us right here. Your Judea might be your state or your district. And so we fund the district. And guess what? The district puts out missionaries, and they work with human trafficking in Arkansas. They have pastors that are setting up churches. So we have two mission congregations in the Fayetteville area right now that they've just started, and they're calling pastors on the district level. Your Samaria might be the United States, okay? And so our district works with the United States on a larger area, and you might know that Arkansas is one of the largest exporters of rice in the United States. So we're buying rice, and we're doing feeding programs for places that need feeding programs around the United States on a district level. You guys don't get to hear all this all the time. And then we have an international level, which we work in Tanzania. Our district specifically works in Tanzania with a special group that they've connected with and partner with to do international missions. So there is an outreach on the part of our church and our district, which isn't really necessarily represented by Frank here today. What Frank is coming with today is to show you that what once was, see, it used to be Synod, when we give our money to district and district would give its money to Synod, Synod funded 100% all the missionaries out of the field internationally. Well, when all that money started getting pulled back, when churches started doing their own individual thing, well, now missionaries didn't have any money. We were pulling missionaries from the field. So what the church started to do in response was to say, we need to raise awareness. Okay? We need to raise awareness that missionaries are having to come in out of the field. So J.P. Sema, my classmate, spends 2 months out of every year furloughing back in the United States and traveling around to individual churches trying to raise funding to support the mission that he's doing in Cambodia. So the effort right now is to turn the tide back to the model that we once had and fund districts and Synod so that Synod can pay. I don't know if you guys know this. It's $200,000. I think was you might be able to correct me on this, but last I'd heard it was like some $200,000 for emergency evacuation insurance for a missionary in the field. It's not cheap to put a missionary out somewhere in the field. That's why you might look at it and go, we only have 100? Well, think about the dollars that it takes to put a missionary in the field, right? And that's why I think churches are getting wiser to go back and go, hey, we had a pretty good model going, and we need to get back to that model. So
yeah, and unfortunately, what can happen sometimes is, you had asked a question about partnership with other with other church groups, but also the partnership that we can have with even congregations is so important because, as Pastor had said, we do have a lot of congregations in our synod that, they do things on their own, and sometimes it can be in an area of the world where we're not doing something, and it makes a lot of sense. But sometimes what can happen is they can be doing work in an area where we're at, and I think the main focus for us is we want to try to have some level of partnership. If there is a congregation or if there is somebody doing something directly in an area, if there's a district doing something in an area, having a bit of synergy between us as a synod with them is important, because what we've seen happen a couple of times in some cases is a congregation gets to a point where maybe they can't support a specific ministry anymore. And so then we're getting a phone call. We've had in some specific instances, we get a phone call where they're like, we can't fund this anymore, but we have this ministry that's doing a lot of great work. Can you help us? And so we do run into that sometimes. That's one that was a church in Indiana reached out to us in Tanzania. Like Pastor had mentioned, we're doing a lot of work with a specific diocese, not just happening at the district level, but as a synod, we're working on building a seminary that we're going to be sending 2 missionaries to that are going to be teaching at this seminary, training up pastors and deaconesses. And so, but they also have a ministry, a church in Indiana that they've developed where a big thing that has a propensity to happen in Tanzania is there's a lot of albino children that are born. And so they've set up a ministry to help these people in Tanzania, these albinos. Unfortunately, as a society, they don't look very kindly upon when you have a child that's albino. It's not looked upon in a favorable manner. And so many of these, primarily women, get pushed to the wayside, unfortunately, by their families. And so this was a ministry that a church had started up we're helping these be able to house and shelter and teach and work with these albino women at a very young age and through to when they get into adulthood. And so that was a ministry that a specific LCMS church had started, but came to us at one point to kind of help intervene and get involved in the work that's happening there. And so that's where I think, as much as possible, I think it's just great to kind of have more of a partnership with one another, because when it comes to work like missionaries, as Pastor said, there's a lot of back office work that happens with the support of our missionaries, and with that, a lot of expense too, to be able to protect these people, because they're in areas where it's maybe not as safe. There's, in some places we even have missionaries in what are called closed countries where they're doing work and they really can't reveal a lot about the work that they're doing, just from a sheer security aspect of things, of what could happen to them, because some countries just are not kind to Christians. And so a lot of work that they're doing, they have to keep it quiet, and there's a lot of security that's involved in, first and foremost, we want to keep our missionaries safe. And so that's where it's such an important piece to be able to have that partnership. If there's other groups that are doing missionary work and other congregations that are interested in that, obviously, as much of a relationship we can have with them is, I think, a plus, because there's a lot we can bring to the table just in being able to support them and help them in what they're wanting to do. But part of it is, just bringing awareness, like Pastor had said. We get the opportunity to bring awareness to people of what is out there in your synod. Sir, you had a quick question. A big part of what our missionaries are doing in the beginning when they go is they are learning the language. That's a big part of what they first do. Our two newest missionaries that we have going out in the field, these are two that are going into Tanzania. They're both pastors from Oklahoma. One's already in Tanzania. Their family was a little further ahead in the process, but right now, as the new seminary is being built in Shinyanga in Tanzania, the family is learning Swahili, because they're going to be teaching in English primarily in the work that they're doing at this seminary, but they're going to be doing a lot of other work as well, in ministering to the people, pastoral care, and being able to interact with people in the native tongue is an important piece. And all of our missionaries, to varying levels, some already have maybe a language background. They already know a language when they're coming to a particular region of the world, but many of them aren't. And so they will go through pretty intensive tutoring to start to learn the language. And I bring up the people in Tanzania because that's one where I've talked recently to some of our missionaries, got to hear them speak in Oklahoma. And hear about their first thing they're doing while this seminary is being built is they're learning Swahili, them and their families. Because in both cases of these missionaries, they both have small children along with their wife and the pastor and going to these areas. And so, yes.
I would add to that, just from the people that I know. So the two that I mentioned, he's from Okmulgee, Oklahoma. He's the one that's in Germany right now. He married a German national. He spoke German because he's second career. He was living in Germany prior to coming back to the States. Married a German woman. But learned Farsi. He's I get regular updates from him. He's teaching Iranian refugees and doing Muslim conversions.
Yeah.
It's sort of a dangerous setup, but he did 2 years of learning Farsi. Sean Trump did 2 years of Swahili, I believe is what he did too. Chuck Berry is another classmate of mine that had to learn, I think it was Vietnamese, and JP Seaman did Vietnamese for
Right.
2 years. So it's not a thing, it is a thing, because we all had to do languages when we were in the seminary. So we've done Greek and we've done Hebrew. I had German in addition to English. So it's kind of a thing that if you learn one, there's a lot of patterning.
Yeah.
It's pretty difficult.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Was there a question from over here, gentlemen, sir? I was just say we don't currently. I know we don't currently have any missionaries that are doing work there, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that. A lot of it's mainly just because we haven't had anybody specifically. We get asked, when we do have situations happen like what happened in Ukraine when the war started there, but also I haven't heard as much about if we're getting questions from what's happening now with Gaza and Israel. we do get asked that periodically from people because we'll get people that'll call in and they just, kind of I guess the latest thing that is going on. We will get asked if there's any sort of like specific work that we're doing there or ways that people can help. And we try to as best that we can if we have kind of an active thing going on where we're able to do so. A lot of times what we'll also do is we'll try to partner people up with other organizations that do work in fellowship with the Synod that are kind of doing their own thing organization-wise, but we have a relationship with them and try to point people in that direction sometimes. It's not one that I've heard, at least specifically. I hadn't heard people just scuttlebutt within the office of whether there's any, if people have been asking about Gaza. I don't know that specifically.
Things that I read used to do here in America. I feel like a lot of Jewish people are just like a lot of American Christians falling away.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sure. Yeah. Good question. It's not one that I do know there's not anything actively that I'm aware of that's happening.
So that'd be a good example, just to answer what I know of it. That's a good example of something that local congregations are doing. So,
Yeah.
for instance, when I was back in the Nebraska district, I know Palestinians that were living in the United States that were Christian, that were serving in churches or had mission contact with churches in Palestine, in Gaza specifically. And then when it comes to like the Jews that you're asking about, Jews for Jesus is not an LCMS RSO. They're their own entity. Okay. We've had them here before, but we do have RSOs within the Synod. So a good example would be another classmate of mine who's a year behind me, that Kevin Parviz,
Yes.
who is a Jew that has Kaiva Shalom in St. Louis. And they do both local work with Jews that are in the United States, but then they have outreach into some of these areas where they have contacts.
Yeah.
So that stuff does go on, but that's a good example of some of the things that we're trying to maybe bring them back into the synodical offices so that we can have better record keeping oversight. I don't know what you call it.
Sure. Yeah.
Continuity, I guess, of service.
Yeah, and that's that kind of transitioning into I have this slide up here with national mission. So as much as we're doing work around the world with our missionaries, we do have, and this is kind of a newer kind of branding piece that's happening with national mission, is God's mission here. So there's a lot of work that we're doing in national mission. One piece of it is, I had mentioned RSOs, which are called recognized service organizations. That's a piece that's out of our office of national mission. That's one where there's lots of organizations that throughout the country that are doing work, whether it's in areas of disaster response, whether it's in areas of just mercy work and providing help to people. There's a lot of organizations that do a lot of work where we maybe either work in conjunction with them. We have a partnership with them to where we can direct people to their organizations that are doing great work. In some cases, we're able to just direct people whenever there's something that we're not directly involved in. We get a lot of people that ask us about, we have a lot of ladies throughout our Synod that make quilts. And so they're always asking, are there any organizations where we can send our quilts? We've even been asked if they can send them to us at the Synod. We can't take them at the Synod, but we do have a handful of organizations within the Synod, our RSOs, that can take these quilts. Because I know a lot of people have sent, over the years, a lot of ladies have sent quilts to Lutheran World Relief, which is that's not an LCMS organization. It's not an organization directly involved with the Synod. But they do a lot of great work. I mean, don't get me wrong, but it's not one that we have really a direct relationship with anymore. But there's a lot of smaller entities that do work as well, RSOs that are giving quilts out to people. So that's just one example that I'm mentioning, but it covers a lot of different areas of need that are out there that our RSOs work in.
Just a quick word on RSOs, again, not to steal your thunder on some of this, but I used to sit on an RSO review committee back in Nebraska. So what an RSO is, a registered service organization is any entity that maybe somebody has a heart for some kind of a mission or type of mission. And one that maybe a lot of people in this room would be familiar with would be the Comfort Dog Ministry. And we've actually got money set aside to see if we could get a Comfort Dog here. And we've been sitting on a list, and I don't know that anything will ever come of it, but they're a registered service organization. And so what they have to meet is doctrinal criteria of the organization that is consistent with the work of our synod. And so what it means is you get this designation. We have a box in the church office that has probably 30 different RSOs that are already approved in our synod. That if you wanted to donate towards, or you had a heart for a specific kind of ministry, I always like to have that box out at Christmas time because I say maybe you don't need anything, but maybe somebody else needs something. So rather than giving me a gift, give a gift to these organizations in my name or something like that. I'm not telling you to do that. I'm telling you these are already vetted institutions that have the goals and the doctrine and teaching of our church body already at the forefront, and they go through regular review cycles. So I sat on the board of directors at a Lutheran high school back in Nebraska, and we have to go through RSO review. So what they do is they check our curriculum, they look at the teaching staff that we hire. Are we hiring or calling Lutheran pastors and teachers from our synodical institutions? We meet all the criteria to be given this RSO status. You can donate to these locations, and it's through the Office of Mission Advancement that they help you with that too. But you can trust that they've been vetted. These organizations have been vetted, and they're doing this consistently with our doctrine and teaching.
Yes, yeah, and even there's even mission organizations that send missionaries, such as Lutheran Bible Translators, if that's an organization you've ever heard of. They're an RSO of the Synod, and Lutheran Heritage Foundation. Yeah, there's hundreds of organizations around the country that do, and that's one thing that we do through our Office of National Mission. And I would say, for the most part, a good chunk of what National Mission does is they provide what I would say is a lot more from the standpoint of resources for our congregations, for our districts, for our schools. Everything from youth ministry. We do our National Youth Gathering that's put on by National Mission every 3 years. That'll be happening in 2025. That's one that a lot of people know. We have campus ministry that they work with kind of, I'd say, engaging and keeping people, our young people that are in colleges, kind of keeping kind of the faith at the forefront of their hearts as well, and have a whole system set up with that. Our school ministry, we've had, not in this district, but one in Branson recently. I learned about a project that we do with our school ministry that's called the Genesis Project. And what that does is, if a community is wanting to start a school, we're able to, as our school ministry, for just based on the sheer cost of starting, if you want to start a school, doing all the steps with feasibility and looking at everything, for a fee of $500, just a one-time fee, we can work with a congregation that wants to start a school to go through all the check boxes you have to do in the beginning, just to see because it's great to say I want to start a school, but there's a lot of logistics that go in it, and really the viability. And where I got to see it firsthand was Faith Lutheran in Branson, Missouri. They're in the process right now of wanting to start a K-8 school, and they've worked specifically with our Genesis project to be able to go through, take a lot of that initial cost off the table for a congregation that wants to do this, and be able to provide them with good, sound resources. And that's what a lot of it kind of ties to with National Mission is, while we're doing a lot of great boots on the ground work, such as our disaster response being one of the big ones out of National Mission, a lot of what we're doing as well is being able to just help out you as part of a congregation, help out a district, to be able to point them in the direction of resources across a lot of different ministries. I could cover every one right now, but it would take a long time in terms of what National Mission does. But it's a lot of great work that they're doing, just to be able to, when people have these needs for help in various ways through different channels, we're able to provide resources to help them through that. I mentioned partnering with our districts. That's a big part of what our disaster response is. That's one that a lot of people have heard of, just because unfortunately a lot of disasters have happened in our country and our world. And primarily disaster response is a congregation and district run initiative. We as a synod are really there for support. We are able to do some granting to help them out in specific disasters that happen. We help coordinate the training efforts of all of our districts that are involved in disaster response. in being able to, we help them just with short-term and long-term needs of both the congregations, the people impacted by disaster, our church workers, and lay people. And a big thing that's come out of a lot of our disaster response lately is that, yes, it's really great that we're able to go in and take our chainsaw crews, alert teams come in and they muck out basements, they cut down trees, they clear away a lot of things. But something that's really come up over the past, I would say, few years is just how much hurt and how much is there the suffering that these people are going to. And sometimes it can be as simple as being there as a worker that can just pray with somebody or give somebody a hug, and be able to do those sort of things. But also one thing we've really tried to do as a synod in supporting our alert teams and our trainers and our districts is to be able to provide them with the ability to provide an after level of care. We did a disaster response conference back in September where we bring together people that are involved with alert teams, the leadership, the district leadership, to kind of talk about best practices. And that's the thing we facilitate across a lot of the national mission ministries is we do a lot of conferences to be able to bring together people involved with them. But specifically with disaster response, there was a gentleman that did a case study about flooding that had taken place in a subdivision in St. Charles, Missouri, up near where I live. And talking about how when he had planned out what was supposed to be a 3-month initiative turned into an 8-month deployment. And one thing he didn't really factor into things was just how much, because the flooding had taken place in the middle of the night, it startled a lot of people suddenly where they had anywhere from 8 inches to 7 feet of water in their basement, in their homes. It's affected close to 100 households in this subdivision. Something he had not taken into account was just the sheer trauma that these people were going to. And so that's an area where we're trying as a synod in disaster response to equip people to deal with that better. That's happening in Maui, seeing the fires, with everything that's happened in Maui. That's been a big thing that the district there in California, the Pacific District, California, Nevada, Hawaii district, in their response that they were doing to the people in Maui is they're trying to provide trained counselors, provide people, and they're doing a lot of work through not specifically the Comfort Dogs, but Lutheran Church Charities, which is the organization that does the Comfort Dog ministry, being able to provide pastoral care, being able to provide counseling. That's just such an area in tragedy that has become, it's always been there, but I think it's just come more to the forefront of people wanting to be able to do more from that avenue of things besides just the physical labor, besides clearing away areas and getting all that out of there. So it's a great thing that we've been able to do to kind of help provide resources for people in that way. Yes, ma'am.
Is that the news area basically in the United States? Lutheran World Relief basically out of it?
I don't know specifically with Lutheran World Relief since that's not an organization that have direct involvement with, but what we do as a synod, primarily our work is through the districts and congregations here in the States. But what we are able to do also is we do provide when there are worldwide disasters, we are able to provide, a lot of times it can be through monetary when people want to donate and help out with things, we're able to send over grants or do different things. I know recently there was, with our partner church body in Brazil, they just had some pretty catastrophic flooding that took place in Brazil. And I know we were able to send our head of disaster response there to Brazil to work with some of our missionaries, but also with some of the leadership in that partner church body to assess the situation, kind of come up with a plan on how they're going to attack everything in the different areas. And also there's funding that are able to go. So there's definitely opportunities where most of it happens here in the States, but when there are international ones, we sometimes can provide some boots on the ground assessment and helping out with people. I think the key thing, anything that we do kind of worldwide, I think the important piece, and even here locally, we unfortunately aren't able to help with every disaster that takes place. One key that they look for, and just to be able to handle the scope of deployment, is having a LCMS congregation that is close by to where a disaster took place. That's kind of a key cog in being able to do it, because in a lot of these cases they are setting up deployment teams, they're setting up these alert teams, and they have to kind of be able to manage out of a specific area. So that's kind of a lot of times a variable that does come into play, is just proximity.
I was the district disaster relief guy in Nebraska. So what they do is they get somebody that's local, and I happen to be the guy in Nebraska. In 2019, we had some catastrophic flooding across the state. What they work to do, and they will work internationally, so Frank's right on that. They'll deploy the people out of our offices in St. Louis worldwide, actually, to work with other people, but they always and forever look to work through the local congregation, whether it's grant giving, aid, and relief, counseling. What they're trying to do is to sort of underscore or reinforce the idea that your help, which comes from the Lord, can be a local thing. And in some cases, you don't have a local church. It didn't stop us, even in those cases, providing funding or some kind of relief process. But we've got a really well-developed disaster relief group. That's why they're able to help us in partner churches and other things around the world. So,
yeah. I wonder, is there coordination between our synod and other synods if we're doing something international? Do we decide we're going or another synod goes? Is there coordination between those two?
I mean, we definitely try to have coordination with, like, in the case, like I'd mentioned with the church body in Brazil, that was one where I think from what I understand, they reach directly out to us, and mainly through our missionaries, because we do have missionaries that are in Latin America, where they were seeing firsthand in a lot of these mission outposts and areas what had happened, and being able to, I think, as much as possible, where to coordinate, being able to coordinate the efforts locally with someone is kind of an important piece to the thing, because I mean, we want to try to help wherever we can, but I know that if there's a case where, I know when there was the earthquake, an example of where we didn't directly do a lot of work, but when the earthquakes had taken place in Turkey earlier this year, we had a lot of people that were asking whether we were doing anything specifically there. In that case, and I think where this kind of becomes an important piece of where our RSOs come into play, like I had mentioned, to where in some cases we may not have the ability to go directly into an area, but we have resources that we can point people to be able to do that. I know in the case of Turkey, we had a lot of people that were going to there's an organization called Orphan Grain Train that does have some things that they were doing. And so when we're not able to, in every case, do something, we do try as much as possible to partner up or direct people to other ministries that we know of that are doing that work. So are we covering every single thing? Unfortunately, probably not. It'd be great if we could, but as much as possible, the partnership is such an important element of when we do get involved. Yeah. Yes, sir.
There's a disaster ongoing right now. I came from Indiana. I was mission and outreach guy for our church, and I had Fort Wayne made me the point guy for the Gary Church. 4 of them, all African American. One church had 4 elderly ladies. What's going on the same things going on in Detroit, Milwaukee, big cities. What's going on? That's an ongoing disaster. And Karen and I were in those churches many times. I made appearances there. We went to church there. Some beautiful churches, and they're going down the tubes because we're losing the people. Is there anything going on in your area helping those city churches?
I'd say we definitely have. I know specifically in Gary, up until earlier this year, we did have a missionary that was working in Gary, Indiana. His name was Delwyn Campbell, but he did take a call earlier this year. He's back in the Michigan district, is now where he is at. So a lot of times it depends on who's out there. I would say, are we always actively reaching out to different areas? I don't know of any specifically with the cities. I mean, we have both the small town ministry, but rural and small town ministry, but we also have an urban ministry where we try to engage, I would say. I mean, we try to engage districts and congregations where we can. A lot of times it's a situation where there sometimes has to be someone coming to the table from the other side too, which isn't always happening in all areas. But it's certainly something where we have a lot of ministries and resources that are out there to help with them. But But how active of them, I can't answer that question specifically. It's a thing that I can definitely ask of people because I am curious.
This is one of those areas, just to answer the question, maybe where districts take that over because they're more the locality.
Yeah.
So a district, and to speak specifically to, I can talk about Milwaukee and Detroit. I know a couple of guys that place in those scenarios where you've got declining numbers in big cities for guys that are being pointed to specific industries in those locations. But that happens on the district level as opposed to the product.
Yeah, we're there with resources, certainly. Like Revitality is a program that we have that is helping not just at an urban level, but churches that are at a point in their congregation where they're wanting, like, what's next in their ministry. Maybe they're a dwindling congregation. Maybe they're a ministry where maybe they're a congregation that they're doing okay, but they're just not sure where they want their church to go and what they're involved in and kind of where their place in their community is. And so we do provide some resources and things in that way. And we're obviously there to support districts as best as we can in being able to kind of help facilitate things that are happening. But I would definitely agree with Pastor. In a lot of cases, it is probably happening more at the district level, at the local level, because frankly, they're there. They're there at those congregations more so than we can be or are.
Get a furnace fixed in one of the churches. I went to Fort Wayne, and they hated to see me coming because a lot of them have it, and I can relate, Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm kind of keeping an eye on the clock here, and I know
Sure.
we're about 5 minutes before services start. So
Sure.
I want to remind you that we'll have Frank available across the street at the time of our meal to speak for a little bit there too. And certainly, I would encourage you to engage him at some point if you've got some other specific questions. Certainly, I'll turn it over to you if you got some stuff you want to give me some last parting details with regard to.
I was going to say I had a few more things to talk about, but then again, I want to be mindful of time as well. So I mean, you never know how the conversations go. But what I do appreciate is that there are a lot of questions coming from you, because that's, I love to be able to, something maybe I haven't necessarily thought of specifically myself, but also just my main role in this, in what I do for the Synod, is being able to just bring awareness and be an advocate to you guys. Now, it's over a 7-state region, so I'm in a lot of different areas, but I try to be there to answer that for people. And that's, I'd say more than anything, I just appreciate the opportunity to be able to do that for you. So, yeah.
Thanks for being with us and helping to open our eyes maybe to some of the things that your church is doing. It's not your church with a small letter C, Redeemer Lutheran Church. It's not the Lutheran Church with a small letter C that is the church, but it's the church with a capital C, where God is still the Lord of His church and is operating through His church, and we become just a small part of that. And you can see that the church body to which we belong is the body of believers that God has put together to accomplish His purposes here on earth, and to sing His praises until He comes. So we appreciate the work that you guys are doing and for sharing it with us and showing us opportunities that exist before us.
Yeah. Amen. Thank you. And don't forget to grab one of the forms here, because I definitely wasn't able to cover a couple of things today, but grab one of those. Thank you.
Yeah.